Hi, shalom friends. Do you know one Jew that hasn't heard of the statement, love thy neighbor as thyself? And yes, it is biblical. In the Jewish Bible, it doesn't come from anywhere else. But how many of us actually could think, what does it mean to love a neighbor like yourself? And ultimately, it almost sounds ridiculous. When someone steps on my toe, I feel it. When someone steps on someone else's toe, I don't feel it. So what does it mean loving him like yourself? So let me give you some practical insights into this. We'll start with a story. The name and times and places are made up, but it did happen. It happened, and we'll call the person Reuven, living in Borough Park, which is in Brooklyn, New York, very heavily Jewish, very vibrantly Jewish, and he's leaving his house in the summer. Actually, it was maybe spring, whatever. He's leaving his house towards evening to go a little shopping. As he goes out, he glances at his neighbor's stoop, and there's an elderly lady sitting there. He knew his neighbors well and did not recognize this lady. So he goes over, he says, Shalom Aleichem, are you waiting for something? She says, yes, I'm waiting to go home. So he says, okay, who's coming to pick you up? She says, no one. So he says, well, how are you going to get home? She says, I'm not sure. So he thinks to himself, something's not right. How did you get here? She doesn't answer. So he thinks maybe she has a touch of dementia or a touch of Alzheimer's or something. So he's going to do a mitzvah. Where do you live? She says an address maybe 20 minutes away. He says, you know what? I'll drive you home. And she says, thank you. Takes out his car. And this is a beautiful act of kindness, right? Take a stranger home. And it takes 40 minutes there and back. He drives to the address. The problem is there is no such address. During the car ride, he asks questions, to make conversation. And she doesn't answer. She answers partially. So he can't wait to drop her off to give her to her caretaker. But when they come to whatever it is, 2818 Avenue T, there is no such place. So he turns to her and he says, do you know the address? She said, well, actually, I'm not so sure, but I know it's near a shul. So now, it's not his neighborhood, but it's a very Jewish neighborhood. Avenue T is still the Flatbush, right? The neighborhood next to Borough Park. So he starts driving up and down the street. And here's a shul. You recognize it? No, here's a shul. Do you recognize it? And after 20 minutes, he realizes that she doesn't know anything. What's he going to do with her now? So he figures he drives back to his home, an hour passed from his 20-minute mitzvah. And he figures the best thing, she must be around here. Someone will be looking for her. He didn't want to leave her out on the stoop. She might just continue to wander. So he brought her to the local precinct, to the police station. He comes in, introduces himself. My name is Reuven Goldstein, whatever, and I just saw this lady. She seems to be lost. And what's the procedure? I said, oh, it has happened before. I'll take your details. I'll try to talk to her, but I could see right away that she's like sort of spaced out. So she'll wait over here, and it's not the first time. Usually the family calls the police station when they get nervous. And then we just simply say, come and pick her up. So he says, it's okay, Rabbi, you could leave, we'll take care of her. And he says to the lady, here, there's a bench, you could sit over here. Can I bring you some water? He looks at the lady and he says, soon you'll be picked up. And as he's about to leave the police station, he turns back and he says to the policeman, he says, police officer, do you mind? Can I stay with her? And he says, it's not necessary. She's safe. He says, but yeah, if it was my mother, I would want someone to be with her. I said, okay, suit yourself. So he's sitting next to this lady. It's before cell phones. After around 20 minutes, he excuses himself, he goes out, he makes a phone call to his wife, he'll be late, he doesn't know when he's coming home, sits with her, tries to make a little bit of conversation. She responds a lot of times she doesn't. And it occurred to him that she might be hungry. So he says, Bist hungrig? Are you hungry? Yes, I am. So he goes out and he buys her something to eat from a kosher restaurant. She eats. Anyway, this story continues. Maybe 6 hours or 5.5 hours later, the relatives come. They call up the precinct. We can't find her. Our grandmother has wandered off. What should we do? And he says, there's actually a lady sitting with a young rabbi, and she was given over. He came back and he realized, look, man makes plans and Hashem is the one that decides what to do. His plan was to go shopping. He saw this lady, he decided he was going to do a mitzvah. How long could it take already? It's a great mitzvah to help an elderly lady back home. And at the end, he invested almost 6 hours in this procedure. Of course, he told his wife, kids, everything's fine. Maybe 3 weeks later, he gets a phone call from his mother. And she says, Reuven, I got to tell you something amazing. She says, I went shopping, last night in downtown Brooklyn. It's not the best neighborhood. It's not a terrible neighborhood, but it's not a Jewish neighborhood, and certainly it was far from where she was. And I went shopping. And it's getting late. The store closes at 8, whatever it is. I just made it. I come out with the packages, and I realized that I locked myself out of the car. So here I am in downtown Brooklyn. I have 2 packages, and I'm standing next to my car. I don't know what to do. And all of the stories of crime come to my mind, and I say, I'm an open mark. I'm an elderly lady, and I'm in the middle of nowhere, and I have 2 bags that are waiting to be snatched, and maybe worse. And I don't know what to do, and I begin to daven to Hashem, please help me. Obviously, she didn't have AAA, or maybe she didn't have a phone, or both. Anyway, as I'm getting nervous, it's getting darker, suddenly I see 2 guys jogging. They're typical summer attire, tank tops and sneakers. One of them has a bunch of tattoos. And they see me standing outside my car on the passenger side with 2 shopping bags. And one of them says, come, let's go over. And she said, as they were jogging over, she said, my heart almost stopped. I was sure they're going to take something from me, and I was just hoping they don't throw me to the floor, as I was going to offer my purse. But they stop, and one of them says, hey, lady, why are you waiting outside over here? This is not the best place to wait. And I didn't know what to do. So I figured, what do I got to lose? I said, I like my cars. Look, my keys are in the ignition. One of them says, you know what, I'm going to stay here with you. And his friend jogs to a service station, not a gas station, a service station. And he had to go a while because most of the service parts of the gas station ended. He came back maybe 40 minutes later. This man is just standing, he's, reading or... He comes back with a mechanic and who jiggles and opens up the door. She said, I was so relieved. I paid the mechanic something, and then I said to the young men, I said, I don't know how to thank you. You saved my life. Can I give you a gift? And the lady that jogged over said, listen, lady, take care of yourself. If you were my mom, I would have wanted someone to stay with you as well. So she tells this to her son, Reuven, who saw this perfect measure for measure. So what does it mean? Love your neighbor like yourself. What it means is, when you look at your neighbor, that person could be your mother, that person could be your father, that person could be your child, that person could be your wife, that person could be your cousin, that person could be your husband, that person could be your best friend. So how would you want someone dear to you to be treated? That's the way you treat others. Not mystical, my friends. Really very practical, really very down to earth. So I'm going to end with a story of my Rabbi. You know who that is? The Rabbi, Rabbi Schneerson, the Lubavitcher Rabbi. Lubavitcher Rebbe, it was a giant amongst, if there would be giants, he would be a giant amongst the giants, way beyond them. And with all of his holiness and greatness, he actually made a revolution in the yeshiva world, not only for his brilliant, insightful discourses, but in the way the yeshiva students should act. By and large, yeshiva students are insulated from the world. They're actually protected. And they're told, your job is to study Torah, you're the elite, you're the spiritual masters, and keep out from business and keep out from the schmutz, the dirt, and the riffraff that sometimes circulates as civilization or progress or art. And by and large, most of the yeshivas, which are full-time yeshivas, the boys are rather innocent in terms of the world. The Lubavitcher Rebbe said, you have to love your neighbor like yourself. There are hundreds of thousands of Jews, in fact, millions of Jews, that don't know how precious the Torah is. Now, go out and meet them and introduce them to the beauty of Torah. So suddenly these yeshiva boys that basically dorm in a yeshiva, they see nothing immodest. They don't listen to the radio or movies. Their life is prayer, study, mitzvahs, companionship. And suddenly, every Friday, they go out to the streets of Brooklyn, Manhattan, maybe Moscow, France, anywhere. They usually open up a little table, and 2-3 guys are standing out there and advertising Judaism. Hi, are you Jewish? Hey, hello, hi. Here's tefillin, here's a brochure, here's a mezuzah, light the Shabbos candles. This revolution caused a counter response. When the Rebbe said that that's what he wants the yeshiva boys to do, to share the beauty of Judaism with others, what happened was that many of the, and I put this in italics, heads of yeshivas, even some Hasidic groups said, what is the Rebbe doing? Taking innocent, protected eyes, innocent, protected hearts, innocent, protected minds, and exposing them to the street? No, we are against this. And then, and I use this word guardedly, foolish people not only disagreed, but poked fun and spoke disparagingly. Which brings us now to Bnei Brak, Israel. I'm not going to mention any names, so I'll make up a name. There's a Rabbi Shaul with his wife Bracha. They have 9 children, and they're Hasidic, very super religious. Today you would call them ultra-religious. Forget about a TV. There's no radio in the house. There's no newspapers in the house. There's only Sidurim and Talmuds and Jewish books, and you were born to be a tzaddik. Finished. That's your job. Their oldest, Shmuley, went to yeshiva, was doing quite well, and he fit the role. He was wearing the uniform, white shirt, dark suit. He had a round hat. He had these beautiful little payas. He would be one of the many tens of thousands of Jewish Hasidic kids growing up in a very vibrant, ghetto-like place. And in a positive way, only Yiddishkeit. Well, little does a family plan for, but Shmuley, when he was a little bit more than 17, began to rebel. He started very subtly. He showed up late for his Beis Medrash, the house of study. He conveniently came the last minutes of prayer and was quickly spiraling downwards. After 2 weeks, the father gets a telephone from the head. What's with your kid? He's not praying at all. And in school, he's the one guy that's not studying. He's not interested. We spoke with him. We're asking, is everything okay? And the father has a talk, and Shmuley doesn't really respond. He's disrespectful by not responding. The father's hoping that it's going to pass. But little did he know that he started to leave the yeshiva and hang out in the streets, and basically became friendly with a group of very irreligious kids. Some of them formerly very religious, so there was a bit of a chip on their shoulders. Anyway, what happened is he stopped showing up in the house on time, spent the night many times smoking and listening to music and doing things that are foreign completely to a Hasidic family in Bnei Brak. The father, Shaul, is realizing that there's a disaster that's unfolding, and there's the good cop and the bad cop. The mother is pleading and crying, and what can I make for you for dinner? How can I get you back? And the father is angry and irritable. To make the sad story very short, it didn't take long. He dropped out of yeshiva, and he came home one day minus his beard, and he had a small bit, and the payas, and a different costume, a colored shirt with jeans. The mother could hardly recognize him, and she pleaded with him, "Don't be here, your father will have a heart attack." And he said, "As a matter of fact, that's what I came to tell you. I love you, Mom, and I don't want to hurt you or Dad or ruin the family. So basically, I'm out of here." Just like that. And he and some of his friends rented an apartment in Tel Aviv and lived a very irreligious life. The father, who's like this big, he had his synagogue and his study group, and he's a chassid, basically was walking around with a hole in his heart. What happened to my beautiful child? He went and he said prayers, and he went to a rabbi, pray for my soul, another rabbi, pray for my soul. And in the meantime, I neglected to tell you something because it was so painful. He was one of the main people in his synagogue that spoke against the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And who is he to speak against the Rebbe? Because he passes a group of kids in Haifa, a group of boys in Tel Aviv. And it's so immodest. And there's so much schmutz, so much foreign influence. And the Rebbe took these kids and is exposing them to, and what value is it that they get someone to put on tefillin? That's valuable? Often that person is not appropriately dressed. The person's only doing it because he's been pressured. It doesn't mean anything. Okay. Let's fast forward 13 months. Shmuley doesn't look like Shmuley anymore. He looks like a regular Tel Aviv kid, and hanging out. And he's walking on not Ben Yehuda, I forget what it was, one of the main streets that has some beautiful stores. He's walking with some of his friends. They're just basically killing time. And they pass a table with 3 Lubavitcher kids from Kfar Chabad. That's the place where I studied a year and 4 months. Wonderful place. And the kids see Shmuley, and they say, "Hey, you have a minute? Rega, 1 minute, can't put on tefillin." Coach says, "Get out of here." He said, "Come on, why not?" Shmuley was not an idiot. And hanging out with his friends in Tel Aviv, he met a lot of people, some okay, many not okay. But he could tell authenticity and genuineness when he saw it. This kid was genuine. He really believed that tefillin is good, and he really wanted him to put on the tefillin. So he says, "Listen here. I know all about the tefillin, and leave me alone." The kid says, "You know all about tefillin? If you knew all about tefillin, you would want to put it on. You're just saying it." He said, now he felt a challenge. "Just saying it? I'll show you." He walks over, picks out a pair of tefillin, and the boy is about to help him. He says, "Get out of here. I don't need you." He rolls up his sleeve. He puts it on like a professional. And he says, "Burich atu," with the inflection of a Hasidic kid. And this boy realizes that this fellow used to be religious, puts on the tefillin, and the kid says, well, it wasn't so bad, was it? And Shmuley laughs. I showed you, I know how to do it. And he left. Shmuley made sure to pass that same place the next Friday, hoping that he'd meet that same kid. He liked him. It was pretty much 1 year younger than him. He sees him, and the guy's like, hi, Shmuel. He said, okay, you don't even have to ask. I'll do it for you. I like you. Puts it on. Anyway, they hit off. And he says, Shmuel, going back, we have like a bus picks us up. Why not spend Shabbat in Kfar Chabad? You could smoke, do whatever you want, but just come for the meal. You'll enjoy the meal. Now, I have to tell you this because I studied there. Now, it's a long time ago. Maybe it changed. When I was there, the Shabbat meal was nothing to write home about. It was really basic. So the meal itself was over, from my perspective, maybe in 20 minutes or less. It was just, a piece of fish, some salad, that was it. But what I could tell you is some of the people left, which was usually me, and some of the people would just stay and sing, Nugunim. And that was beautiful. The 1 or 2 times that I stayed, it was really moving. It was, I don't know if you could picture it, 18, 19-year-old boys sitting by a table, maybe 12, 15 of them, really singing beautifully. I mean, there's no orchestra, there's no nothing, but they're really singing in my lev with the heart. And every once in a while, someone tells a story. The main thing is the melody. So this boy, after the meal, says to Shmuel, come join us. He was captivated. And look, after all, he grew up religious. After all, you think he didn't miss Shabbos? He was just too embarrassed. And what happened was he began to come to Kfar Chabad more often. And eventually he started to put on tefillin daily. And he used to call his mother, who was, always praying for the kid, saying, Ma, you'll be proud of me. I'm coming back. Please come back. But I want you to recognize me. So I'm not coming back until you recognize me. She didn't exactly understand what that meant because she didn't really understand where he was. Anyway, finally, when his beard and his payas come back, he buys himself the costume and goes home, and you could understand the joy of the reunion. When finally the father is able to get to himself, he tells Shmuley what happened. Shmuley basically says, I rebelled, I was upset, I didn't like everyone so, but what brought you back? He says, Chabad. I was walking, I really had nothing to do. I mean, how much could you smoke already? There was nothing to do. We just walk in the streets, and these kids, they asked me to put on tefillin, and I hit off with this fellow, and anyway, here I am. The father realized, like a ton of bricks that had hit him, here he was making fun, poking fun, saying things that no Jew should say against a righteous, holy individual, and certainly not against a leader. And he realized he has to go to New York and both apologize to the Rabbi and to thank him. He had family in New York, he flies to New York, he sees his family, and I'm not sure if he got a private audience or if it was perhaps the Rabbi was walking in to the prayer service and he stopped him. I don't know exactly how it happened, but he said, Rebbe, I'm so-and-so Shaul from Bnei Brak. I want to truly say I am sorry for all of the things I've spoken against you. And I want to say I thank you from the bottom of my heart that you brought back my son. To which the Rebbe looked at him and said, I want to let you know that every Jew, the way you feel about your son returning, every Jew that returns gives me that same feeling of gratitude to Hashem. And that's, my friend, the end of my YouTube for you. Love your neighbor like yourself. This is your kid. What would you want for your child? Let's end off like we're supposed to. You know what we always want? I want my kids to be happy. Actually, we want our kids to be fulfilled. We want them to be wholesome. And that, of course, includes happiness. What do you think Hashem wants from us? We're God's children. He wants us to be happy. But not a silly happiness, a complete happiness, a wholesome happiness, a happiness that's meaningful. Well, we're on our way. We've accomplished a great deal. Our Rebbe says, well, we're just about there. Let's hope and pray by the time you get this YouTube, the Mashiach will have already arrived. And then you'll just put me on one of the things to listen to when you have nothing else to do, because when Mashiach will come, we'll be busily, happily celebrating our heritage, our tradition, and our love for Hashem. Shalom.